first and foremost, you believe him when it comes to that? And secondly, what is the best when it comes to those two options? What is best for the Boston Bruins?
Well, neither one of them is very good, right? I mean, he's still been a very efficient player. We talked earlier, and this was my sentiment, that I would have asked him if he wanted to try to win a championship with some other team. If he said no, then I think because of his career, you would have honored that and just let him ride it out. And he probably has, more ability to stop a trade than anybody else in hockey. But I'm nervous for Patrice and for all players who've been knocked in the head 5 or 6 times and had to spend time on the sidelines. He's still a relatively young man, but not young by hockey standards. I think it's time for him to hang it up. But if he does, it's going to leave a huge hole in the Bruins lineup, because that means the number 1 center and the number 2 center spots are not filled, and those are not easy to find guys to fill.
Mike, and I think that becomes the issue that I have with the Bruins and which direction they're going in, because it seems like Bergeron wants to play, and it looks like the Bruins are going to bring him back. How confident are you in this team if they bring him back and it's basically the perfection line again? It's, Hall on the second line. It's the same cast of characters that we saw this year. What's your confidence level like if that's your team next year?
My confidence level, to what degree, I guess, would be my rejoinder. But I think what you're going to get is, this league allows half the teams in the league to make the playoffs. And the Bruins just barely made it. They were at the bottom edge of the playoff teams that made it. And I don't see that getting any better. I mean, they do have 1 or 2 good prospects coming, but none of them are centers. And I don't feel like, listen, we'll go through the whole thing. Goaltending was okay. There was a hullabaloo because of Rask coming back. It's wound up with Swayman and Ullmark. So that looks to be an okay position. At defense, they've got a number 1 by anybody's standards in McAvoy. Little too early to say what exactly Lindholm is, but I think he'll be a number 2. I'm pretty confident that he can be a number 2 defenseman. And, I like Carlo to a certain extent. I just wish he'd be more physical. And then there's a bunch of other guys. Grzelcyk's stock went way down. Clifton's okay, but he's sort of a mini-me on defense. So they're okay on defense, but not like overwhelmingly deep. And so that gives you an okay in goaltending, maybe better as time goes on. Good on defense, but great not on the bottom 3 for sure. And then forwards, you've got the perfection line, which may be imperfect if Bergeron leaves, and Taylor Hall, who I'm not a fan of. I just don't think he knows how to win. He's got skill, but I don't know if he's got the will to get there, get it done. DeBrusk is a guy that wants to go elsewhere. And after that, you've got, throw a blanket over most of them. There's some skill there, but not top 6 skill. This is an average team. If Bergeron leaves, it's going to be below average.
Can you get value for DeBrusk, or did he not do anybody any favors?
Well, I don't know what happened here. We've speculated on this. Was it the coach and he having an issue? He's shown flashes of what he can be. You don't know if they can solve the problems and keep him here, or if he's going to put his foot down and say, "I'm not coming back. You got to trade me." And do they get stubborn and not trade him? Well, he's certainly a tradable asset. Somehow either they got to solve the issue with him and see how he develops and what limit he can go to, or they got to move on. I don't think they want to have another distraction like that for the entire season. It was a pain in the ass.
Would you trade a player like Pastrnak?
I don't know why you would. I mean, he's a skill player, does what you need to do. It's the whole object of the game is to score goals. And you got to find him somebody to play with, and they certainly did with Bergeron and Pastrnak. They're fun to watch. I don't know why you'd trade Pasta. I think he's a guy that sells tickets and scores goals, and pretty good combination.
Well, when it comes to Pasta, he was emotional yesterday when they asked him about, a tough year for him personally and on the ice. Do you think that maybe his personal life bled into this season and we could see a better Pasta come next season?
listen, what he went through was not fun and not easy for anyone. I think that he's still a young player. I still think he's got some maturing to do. He's had some ups and downs, but he seems to bring some joy to the table when he's ready to play, and that's most nights. I've got no issue with him.
Mike, so let's say Bergeron does retire. What do you do then? Do you say, okay, is it maybe time, because it seems like I agree with you, I would move on from Pasta. Is it maybe time to move on from Marchand and see if we can, get rid of DeBrusk and other guys and rebuild this thing around Pasta?
Well, they have other building blocks. Like McAvoy is a tremendous guy to build around, but I advocated early in the season that it was time to start thinking of what the next steps would be. So, yeah, I have to say yes to that as much as I love Bergeron and Marchand, and I said that earlier, but, the cycles come and go, and they're at the end of the Bergeron cycle or near the end of the Bergeron cycle, and that means you have to retool, and that means tough decisions and risky decisions. But guys that are at the end of the spectrum in terms of their career length, you have to take a look at if they can bring you value to build the next group, and I think that's where they were to start the season, and I think the results proved it.
And the coach's job is secure, you think?
Yeah, we talked about his. I hope he never resorts to that again. I think he's a good guy. I think he was maybe a little frustrated. Maybe he saw what some of us saw early on, that this was going to be, he's going to have to really work hard to make things happen. But he made some good adjustments during the playoffs to keep this team pumping, and I think he deserves credit for that. And I think he's been an honest and fair coach. Whether the DeBrusk thing was his problem or DeBrusk's problem, I don't know. But I do think he's done enough to justify, coming back. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind about that. But I do think he's going to have to face some really difficult issues next season. And Don Sweeney, he's got some work to do. This is a tough time to be a general manager when you see the turnover, and you're fine on the back six. All those guys seem to have character. I appreciate his focus on making sure his back six was hardworking, and they proved that they could be. But the top six is where it's at, the guys that score goals. And if Bergie leaves and Krejci's already gone, there's a lot of hand wringing and a lot of gambling that will be done in the front office this summer.
If you're Don Sweeney and Patrice Bergeron comes to you and says, hey, it's not working with Cassidy and this team, it's either I stay, Cassidy goes, or I retire and Cassidy stays, what do you do if you're Don Sweeney?
I don't know. First of all, I don't think Bergeron would do that. Secondly, if I were Don Sweeney, I would consider his opinion, but I wouldn't be burdened by it. If he thinks, Bergeron's got 1 or 2 years left. If he decides he wants to come back, I think Don Sweeney has to be bold enough to make the decision on his own. But certainly he would ring some alarm bells. Bergeron would if he ever were to do that with Don Sweeney. But at this point, I don't see that happening.
All right, Mike, let me take it one step further. If you're Don Sweeney and Bergeron goes, I want to come back and play, what do you do?
Yikes. I guess you say yes, but, and then maybe you say, hey, listen, that's great. I'm happy for you. He's been a great player for the organization. You'd have to say this is good news on many fronts, but you might say to him, okay, Bergie, but if it looks like we're going south and, it gets to be January, February, and doesn't look like we're real contenders, would you consider the possibility of us moving you to Colorado or Florida so that they can, or Tampa, or teams where you can really have a chance to make a difference in a Stanley Cup run? That would be the conversation that I would have. But if he wants to come back, I think the organization owes it to him to give him a reasonable contract. But, I would at least have that conversation with him, because I don't see, even with his return, I don't see them being Stanley Cup contenders. Playoff contenders? Yes. Is that good enough to satisfy Boston fans? I don't think so.
Non-Bruins related before you go, Sidney Crosby pissed about that helmet rule, basically saying it cost them Game 7. Is that something that should go away?
Wah, wah, wah. I mean, what the hell? I mean, it was done for the safety of the players, and so that wasn't the thing that turned the tide for them. I mean, it had an impact, but listen, I don't like the rule either. You should be able to. I played without a helmet for a long time.
Hence why you sound like you do at this point.
It's obvious what's happened to me because of that. But no, I mean, what are you going to do? Let's move on.
Mike, did you take your helmet off before beating the guy up in the elevator?
Yes. No, I was in street clothes at that time. And next year, I'll tell you about the guy in Minnesota.
Ooh, that's a
horizontal tease.
That's an excellent tease. All right, well, listen, it's been great having you on all season. I'll one more time, if you're in the mood, join us if you want. Beachcomber will be down in your neck of the woods, Wellfleet, I think on June 7th.
Yes.
So maybe we'll see you then. But thanks a lot for being a part of the show this season. We really appreciate it, Mike Milbury.
I had fun. Thanks, Greg. And the rest of you guys, have a good summer, and we'll hopefully talk in the fall.